A few items I'd like to discuss with you all here today before we go into the question segment. The first is, yesterday there was a find of narcotics on an LNG tanker at the Atlantic Pier. Just to let you all know that whilst I'm seeing it being circulated in public, a value of 120 million, we haven't exactly, I certainly haven't been provided with the information as to the exact value. But I'm using this opportunity to let the public know that yesterday's operation was a tremendous success. And when the people at Atlantic first saw it and they started their protocols, they immediately contacted us. For the whole period of yesterday, from about 9 o'clock in the morning, even though I was in Tobago, I was in contact with the CEO of Atlantic LNG, and I'm using this opportunity now to thank the professionalism of the men and women in the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, the Marine Interdiction Unit of Customs and Excise, and our Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We had an operation that ran for a number of hours, over I think about possibly an 8-hour period. The suspicious package, when it was first seen and we were notified, the area was cleared because, of course, you weren't sure what the package was. And those three divisions, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, or Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, as well as the Marine Interdiction Unit of Customs and Excise and other interdiction units of Customs and Excise, secure the packages throughout the period of the day. We were in constant contact with Atlantic. They were in constant contact with me and the Chief of Defense Staff, the CEO of the Coast Guard, and the operation was a success, and they managed to seize quite a lot of narcotics, which appear to be cocaine from the testing last night. Unfortunately, this vessel in 2015, this particular vessel that came from Spain here to fill up with LNG to return to Spain, this particular vessel had an incident in Peru, a similar incident in Peru in 2015. So the opportunity is to thank all of the persons who played a part in that operation yesterday, and to thank them for the work that they did, and to give them a pat on their backs, because it was a success. We also thank Atlantic LNG. Of course, this is just a tanker that came in, and we're not sure how the narcotics got on board. I'm told this morning it could not have come from on top of the ship, meaning going into the ship from on top. You actually had to dive and go underneath, but all of that will be confirmed in due course. This has nothing to do whatsoever with the Atlantic facilities or anything to do with Atlantic LNG, and I'm just happy that we managed to have this find, that no one was hurt or injured, and that we've taken a significant quantity of narcotics off of not the streets of Trinidad and Tobago, but off of the international global scene. The second issue I'd like to deal with was yesterday the Honourable Prime Minister, along with the Honourable Minister of Works and Transport, had a number of visits to a number of various sites in the eastern part of Trinidad, and in particular the northeastern part of Trinidad. And it was somewhat disappointing to have it still being reported that with respect to the Camuto to Sandy Grande highway, so that's what I'm focusing on now, the government took a decision, as you all know, well over a year ago, and began the works well over a year ago, to start the construction of a highway from Camuto to Sandy Grande. This highway does not pass through the Aripo Savannah. At no point of the projection of this highway is it going through the Aripo Savannah. So the government, in its efforts to show the rest of Trinidad and Tobago exactly what has been happening, where the highway is locating, because as you know, what had happened with this particular construction project was that it was stopped when some persons, fishermen and friends of the sea, went to court. It went all the way up to Privy Council. And there was a lot of misinformation being put into the public at that time as to this passing through the Aripo Savannah and affecting wildlife and these types of things. The government at every point in time made it very clear that that is not happening, that we've been working with the EMA. The EMA gave planning permission, gave permission, EMA permission, Environmental Management Authority permission to utilize the path. Went up there yesterday for a site visit, took the members, invited the members of the media who were present. You would have seen exactly where the clearing has been. The clearing has been through not the Arepo Savannah, but through a specific area that is actually government-grown pine and a government-owned forest where pine was being grown commercially. So I want to put it to rest here today because unfortunately one of the news houses last night continued with this narrative that is passing through the Arepo Savannah. That is absolutely false, it's incorrect, and unfortunately the member who had that broadcast should have known better because they were present. But now I'm putting it to rest, hopefully, that at no point does this Camuto to Sangre Grande highway pass through the Arepo Savannah. There was quite an extensive, the third point I'd like to address here today, there was quite an extensive press conference before Cabinet this morning by the Minister of Works and Transport and a team to deal with the government's leasing of a fast ferry, which is supposed to arrive here in May of this year from Virtue Holdings. And I just want to again deal with this effort by the UNC opposition to say that this was a secret deal. Hopefully by now, and with all of the information provided at this morning's press conference at the Ministry of Works and Transport, to the members of the public, there was absolutely nothing secret about this deal or transaction. That is the United National Congress, the UNC opposition, continuing in their efforts to try and create some level of crisis or some level of discomfort throughout Trinidad and Tobago with respect to these fast ferries. This first came up at our conversations with the Prime Minister sometime last year, where the Minister of Works, and it might have actually been at the one we had in Tobago, spoke about how we were going to deal with the fast ferries and say there was a short-term, a medium-term, and a long-term plan. The short-term, the medium-term, and a long-term. The long-term is, as you all are now aware, that we have ordered 2 fast ferries, and this morning at Cabinet, I'm happy to say, Cabinet approved and confirmed today at Cabinet the financing for these 2 ferries. When the Prime Minister had his working visit in Australia last year, at the invitation of the then Australian Prime Minister, one of the entities that we met with was the Export Financing Corporation, EFIC, in Australia. This morning at Cabinet, we approved and confirmed the Australian EFIC has agreed to provide financing for the purchase of those 2 fast ferries, one from INCAT and one from Austal. So we are going ahead with that financing, favorable financing terms, which the government of Australia helped us to arrange with EFIC, which is a government import financing facility company in Australia. So that is now in place. That is a long-term solution. In Tobago last year, Minister Sinanan did indicate that we were going to go out as a government for an invitation for proposals, an invitation for tenders for persons to provide on a lease basis a fast ferry or any type of ferry. We were hoping for a fast ferry that would be able to plug the time between the new ferries arriving. And you would recall we took the Express out of circulation. The Express is to be sold on an as-is, where-is. When an assessment was done, the Express vessel, it was decided it would be too much money to bring it back. And now what should happen is that we should try to get a vessel to supplement both the Galleon's Passage as well as the Spirit in the interim. So that was first spoken about last year by Minister Sinanan. It was also subsequently spoken about by the Prime Minister when he said, look, these are the issues we're dealing with. We're going to see if we can get a vessel to lease in the interim period. What is worse is that a public advertisement placed in the newspapers in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as on websites and international publications, went out in August last year, inviting the world at large, anybody in the world who could supply a vessel within certain perimeters for Trinidad and Tobago to lease for a period of time. As a result of that invitation, a number of operators across the world put in their tenders, put in their offers. Those were then evaluated by an evaluation committee that included a representative from the Tobago, former chairman of the Tobago chapter of the Chamber of Industry and Business in Tobago. They did their evaluation, provided it to NIDCO. Inquiries were made as to, listen, when do we absolutely need this vessel by? We said we could wait until May of this year. And this is how the Virtue came about. The Virtue, vessel that you're all aware of is going to be leased for the period of a year. This is a 10-year vessel compared to the other vessels that were being offered, some which were 25 years old, and around that time frame and that time period, that aged number of vessels. This has the technology. Again, it's an Australian-built vessel, similar to what we have ordered, but what we have ordered, of course, 10 years of technology has improved tremendously. So this whole false narrative that there was, how did this vessel come about, and there's some secrecy, I want to attempt to put that to rest here today and say once again, as was said in the press conference this morning where details were given, this is completely false and there's no truth to it whatsoever. The fourth issue I'd like to deal with here today, and I just saw one of the media houses put out an article on it. You all would have been alerted by me as Minister of National Security earlier this week, if I remember correctly, it may have been 2 nights ago, about certain threats that we had picked up in the national security apparatus with respect to prison officers. And I had put out a very careful statement saying that this will not be tolerated, and anyone who threatens not only prison officers in our system, but any member of any arm of law enforcement or any member of any arm of any of national security, it is not going to be tolerated. At the time, I said we were deploying assets. As the public is now aware, as a result of operations, and I've told you all we will be doing things via intelligence-driven operations, I'm happy to say that we were successful in picking up one of the persons who it is alleged was preparing himself to attempt to do harm to prison officers. And I want to use this opportunity to send a very, very strong signal to anyone, including those in the prison system. Because you see, there are a number of criminals in the prison system who for too long have been allowed to operate behind the bars of the prisons as though they can continue to run their criminal empires on the outside. And they could continue to communicate with the persons on the outside and send threats, not only for prison officers, but to send threats to other law-abiding citizens. I have been meeting with the heads of security. In fact, yesterday when I returned on a visit from Tobago along with the Chief of Defence Staff, I called a meeting with the Commissioner of Police, Chief of Defence Staff and the Director of the SSA, our Intelligence Services, and told them that the 4 of us, as well as the other arms of national security, must be on the same page. And when it comes to these criminal elements who are on the inside of prisons thinking that they can threaten persons, it is not going to be tolerated. Intelligence-driven operations are going to continue. I'm happy that we met with success. I'd like to thank the men and the women in the intelligence services in our Trinidad and Tobago Police Service who picked up this individual, this criminal element on the outside, who thought that he would be part of a plot or a ploy to harm one of our law enforcement officers. As we pick up this information, it will be actioned. There is the will from the Minister of National Security go down to all of the heads that we are not going to tolerate the criminal element wreaking fear and havoc with our citizens and with those who choose to serve Trinidad and Tobago. We will continue to do our work, we will continue to be vigilant, and we will continue to deploy all of the resources at the state's asset base in the fight against criminality. The last item I'd like to raise is one that I've been speaking about for the past, I would say, month or so. I think it was in March I first announced it. Today I did take to Cabinet a note with a proposed policy as to how we would deal with the Venezuelans who are in Trinidad and Tobago and the whole registration process. That note went to Cabinet today. I've made certain proposals to Cabinet. A decision was taken to send it to the Finance and General Purposes Committee, which will sit on Monday. That is the committee, a subcommittee of Cabinet that looks at some of our Cabinet notes in more detail and interrogates it better. As you would be aware, this policy has very far-reaching effects. There are a lot of things to consider, etc. So we will be considering the note on FNGP, as we call it, Finance and General Purposes Committee, on Monday, and thereafter, hopefully, FNGP will make the recommendations to Cabinet next week, Thursday. So the note is finally before the Cabinet and will be interrogated further by FNGP Committee on Monday. At this time, I'll invite questions.
Does your cabinet note of the Venezuelan policy, does it have anything to do with what would happen to the children with regard to schooling?
That is going to be part of the discussion on Monday. So we want to have a fuller, broader discussion with respect to the education aspect of this on Monday. So I don't want to be premature in any decision, because at this stage it is before all of my cabinet colleagues for us to discuss.
Minister, just continuing along that same line, is it any of the other, you mentioned other things about how Venezuelans will be registered and so on. Anything else in this note which is different from what you previously mentioned in public?
No, I haven't drifted off of it at all. So, I mean, let's wait until next week when I can announce what has been decided. But basically, it was trying to forecast a period of time. It's going to be a 2-week period of time, the type of resources we're going to need to register persons. We're going to I've proposed 5 different centers for registration over this 2-week period, what we're going to have in those registration centers, how it could work, the forms and this type of thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, when you mentioned about the financing arrangement for the two new house ferries from Australia, could you maybe give us a little bit more details about the specific of the financing, like cost arrangements?
Unfortunately, I can't. Because I simply can't remember the exact specifics, and I would not want to give any misinformation. They're favorable terms of financing. They're being provided by EFIC in Australia. I think it is for up to 80% of the cost of the vessels, and we will raise the other 20%. And we have been in financing arrangements with EFIC before with respect to our water taxis, as well as the 6 hostile fast ferries, and we've always serviced the loans, so we had very good credit ratings.
I might very quickly just go across to the Jardin de Ballette. One of the claims the opposition was making today was linked to the Prime Minister when he was in Malta in 2016, and trying to allege some sort of link between the investment visit to some sort of biscuit company over there and that sort of thing.
So I did not. But fortunately, let me put it that way, I was fortunate in that I did not have to view the press conference, I understand, of Mr. Wade Mark that was taking place whilst we're in Cabinet. As I've explained before, whilst we're in Cabinet, we don't have contact via our cell phones or devices with what is going on outside. So let me put the facts out there, because it seems as though the opposition and persons who are intent on working for the opposition want to just create this whole distortion of reality and want to create a different world, let's put it that way, that is not a truthful world or world based on fact. The Prime Minister went to Malta shortly after assuming office in 2015. The Prime Minister, my recollection is was in October or November 2015, the Prime Minister went to Malta for the CHOGM, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting that was being held in Malta. Whilst he was there is a Trinidadian investment in Malta, a biscuit factory that was set up. I know a little bit about it. I think it was set up in the 90s and is owned by Associated Brands. The Prime Minister went there to visit. You would expect that a Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago who's in Malta, and there's a significant Trinidadian investment in Malta, they invited the Prime Minister of Trinidad to visit the factory. That is the only thing that he did outside of the attending all of the official matters associated with CHOGM, all of the official events, the official meetings, etc. So yes, the Prime Minister did go to this biscuit producing factory in Malta that has been around since the 1990s. To then make this leap and this allegation that is in some way associated with anything to do with this Virtue Holdings ferry that we're leasing is completely ludicrous. And for anyone to follow that and to try and link that where there is no link, they're very, very dishonest. But this is not surprising, because this is the way that Wade Mark and others in the opposition have been operating. I have commented on it this week about the continuation of the Cambridge Analytica playbook. This is straight out of the Cambridge Analytica playbook of the UNC. Throughout distortions of reality, throughout facts that are not real, lies actually, distortions of reality, untruths, and hope that one of them will stick somewhere. So there is absolutely no link between the Prime Minister's visit to a CHOGM conference in November 2015 and where we are today in 2019, 4 years later, with the lease of a vessel. And the only reason this vessel is available to be leased is that the operators in Malta have taken delivery of one of these new vessels, and I can't remember if it's from Ostal or if it's from Incat, but one of these new state-of-the-art, because they're one of the largest ferry operators in the European Union, in Europe, and they very often change over their fleet. So the boat that we're taking is only available because the Maltese operator has taken delivery of a new vessel.
The opposition is saying that the PM did more than visit. He also invested, what they're saying, €6 million into the company.
That is completely... They said this outside of Parliament. Who said it in the press conference? Well, let me warn you, Mr. Samru, be careful about what you're taking from people. I don't know who your colleague is. I didn't hear the press conference. There was absolutely no investment of any state funds on that prime ministerial visit to Malta. As I say, he went for CHOGM.
Minister, is a threefold question. Is there a
what question?
There's three components.
I thought you said straightforward.
Yeah. Is there a cut-off date in respect to the Venezuelans in terms of that will be considered for this?
Yes.
Is there a cut-off date, and you will tell us. But beyond that, has CARICOM and in particular Haiti been given at this point any consideration where this is concerned? And finally, within your recommendation, as you had mentioned before, you had said that there will be an ID card will be given to
not an ID card, a registration card, yeah.
And I want to ask if there any consideration be given to the persons of the CSME, because they have to walk around with a thing bigger than this in their hands. All CSME persons are big that will walk around as police can actually hold them if they don't have this massive piece of sheet of paper in their hands. Is there any consideration being given to them?
Thank you very much, Mr. Boris. As I told you on the last occasion, because you raised very similar points last week, this note is dealing with the Venezuelan situation. We have a situation that is developing on a daily basis with Venezuela. This week I actually went up to the IDC, the Immigration Detention Center, and I'm pleased to say that not many, I think it was only 2 or 3 CARICOM-based persons are at the detention center. All of the rest, we had about 2 or 3 from Africa. The vast majority of Venezuelans who are being held there. So we're dealing with this. The policy that I've brought is a Venezuelan policy. That's the first point. The card, as you say, is an identification card. So as part of the registration process, at the end you'll get an identification card. Right now the submission is that in 6 months' time, we're going to tell you where you have to report to in the immigration system for us just to confirm the information remains accurate, etc. So the note is, at this time, only for Venezuelans. We have heard you, as I told you on the last occasion, with respect to the CARICOM or CARICOM brothers and sisters, as well as Haiti. So I made it my duty, a point of going up there this week to where those who infringe our immigration laws are being held, to get a better idea of what is going on with our CARICOM brothers and sisters and why it is that they would be held there, etc. What are the circumstances? So no, at this time, it is not proposed that this note deal with them. That does not stop, because it did come up at cabinet discussion, and I'm sure we'll have further discussion at F1GP, whether we need to take a decision soon after this with respect to the persons you've described. Yes, there is going to be a cut-off date, as I've said time and time again. I've proposed a 2-week period for the registration. So once the registration ends after that 2-week period, then it is cut off for the benefits of the registration process. We revert back to the laws normally applicable. And I'll give the dates because, again, I don't want to be premature or presuppose what my colleagues will eventually decide with me.
Good afternoon. From TV6. With respect to the boat,
Which boat?
The Maltese vessel, the Jean de Valette, if I pronounced it correctly.
The what? JV.
So in an effort to quell some of the concerns that are already out there in the public, and I didn't get this from the ministry's conference earlier today, had the boat been inspected at all? What about accident
You
reports?
were at the press conference earlier today? Okay, well, I wasn't at the press conference either. I don't have those facts. I mean, that was the opportunity for the media. We made sure that persons were told yesterday there would be this media conference. All of the experts who are dealing with the, thank you for the acronym, JV, the Maltese vessel, were there today to answer those questions. I don't have those facts in front of me, but I do know that the chairman of the port, as well as the chairman of NIDCO, did go out to Malta and make a visit to see the vessel, etc. And I do know as part of that process, surveys were done. I think there were Lloyd surveys done, but I don't have the specific facts. And part of that surveying would be to look at the suitability of the vessel.
On a matter that is more in your direction, now the Commissioner of Police has said that he's making moves to have less police stations and more officers on the job, doing work, online reports. He's looking to facilitate those types of things. What's your take on this?
I saw that reported in the media. It is something he has mentioned to me in passing, not as a policy, but in our many, many discussions over the last 6 months. He said words almost identical to what I saw being reported in the newspapers attributed to him, that politicians just like to build police stations here, there, and everywhere and open police stations. And I smiled and I actually teased him at the point that he was Minister of National Security at one point in time and how many of these police stations came on. From a philosophical point of view and an efficiency point of view, I understand exactly what the Commissioner of Police is talking about, because he talks about the number of men and women in the police service you need to man a police station, and that for a small population like ours and a small island like ours, and I think he compares it to New York City or New York State, and the number is almost comparable in terms, I think I saw 71 there or 77 here or interchangeably. So I understand what he's saying. But the truth is, in Trinidad and Tobago, our population has become accustomed to police stations, police posts in certain places. So I'm sure that's a conversation we'll continue to have. I am not necessarily in favor of shutting down police stations. I can understand a discussion where we may shut down some police posts, but then we have to be certain that they're going to be covered. So the use of technology, the Commissioner of Police and I this week went to the E99 station, and part of that visit to the emergency rapid response units as well as E99 is using technology. So if we're sitting in one central location and we know where all the vehicles, the police know where all the vehicles are, and a call comes in from a specific area, the GPS tracking now, we could say, okay, these are the vehicles close, deploy them. If we have systems like that in place, then the population is going to be safer, and you don't need a police post with someone answering a phone to say, I don't have vehicles in the yard, I can't get out there. It is better we take our limited resources. So from that point of view, I agree with the Commissioner. Let's look at utilization of our limited resources, use of technology, and get best value for money, but also how do we protect and serve our citizens in the most efficient manner.
His other suggestion of having undercover police officers in schools.
I also saw that reporting. We have been discussing the use of undercover police officers. You would have heard me say here, may have been last week or not too long ago, putting plainclothes police officers, for example, at the Piarco airport to deal with any threats to immigration officers, persons being followed, etc. I would have to have that discussion with him and the Minister of Education to understand what it is about. In fact, what I recall is in my younger years, there was a show on television, I don't know if you remember it, 21 Jump Street, and there was that whole philosophy. But I will speak to the Commissioner of Police, he will have to put it forward.
Minister, if I could, keep sticking with your portfolio, have you been made aware of a situation where there's a TNT national, Tobagonian to be precise, who's apparently been detained in Grenada? Apparently he's a fisherman of some kind, and he went adrift and he washed ashore, and he's being held there by the Grenadian police. Are we looking into that?
Yesterday I launched 2 of our interceptors in Charlottesville, and I was speaking to the media there. I am always very, very careful as to the use of fishermen. Not everybody who's on a vessel departing the shores of Trinidad claiming to be fishing or a fisherman is actually a legitimate fisherman. So I want to start with that point. I was made aware yesterday when I was with the Chief of Defence Staff and the Coast Guard officers of this. I'd seen it in the media before, of this person who's been picked up. I don't know if he's being detained. At the time I asked them, look, we need to get more facts surrounding if one of our nationals is in Grenada, what is happening. Did the vessel drift there? What are the circumstances under which he is in Grenada, not even being held, because I don't know if he's being detained against his will or if he's been arrested or anything like that. Last I saw on the media was he was getting medical treatment. So I don't have any further facts than that surrounding it, but I did ask that the facts be obtained.
That's the police who are checking into this, or
I had spoken to the Chief of Defence Staff and the Coast Guard. Because the police, as territorial to Trinidad, we can go through Interpol, though.
You have become quite adept at the duplication and skimming of bank cards and credit cards and so on. With respect to these ID or the registration card, is there going to
security
be
features?
Yes. Coming.
Those are some of the things that need to be looked at. The answer is yes. Obviously, we would want some sort of security features on these cards. Unfortunately, with everything, no matter what it is, there are sometimes those who decide to duplicate and to basically break the law, etc. So that is one of the things for discussion and in the implementation side of these ID cards to see what security features we can have on them.
Since cell phone became very popular, like after the turn of the century, there's been at least over 7 ministers of national security, right? At least 4 in the last government, 2 in this one, and then like I said, the 1 for each one going on the road, right? So I met about 10 around there.
You coming to get rid of me or what?
No. And then at least 5 prison commissioners. And yet still you all have not been able to clamp down on the use of cell phones in prison. You don't think that's some kind of indictment on security? That's a lot for people.
I understand what you're saying. It is something that we have been looking at and we frequently discuss. I don't want to say too much about the systems that exist now, nor do I want to say too much about what it is we're doing, because obviously that information gets out there. People can then find ways around it. Technology changes. So you would see 1G, 2G, 3G, LTE, 4G, and these types of things. Every time technology changes, you also need to change your technology. I don't want to say much more than that, but you all will notice by now that there is a lot more taking place in that national security sphere. One of the things, and now I'm moving away from answering that exactly, our detection rates have increased. So now I was actually telling the heads of the various arms this week in my meeting on Monday, the public now expects, more so than before, that when you see something take place, a few days later or within the next couple of weeks, someone is brought to justice for that. For example, the unfortunate incident that happened with one of our pensioners in Tobago, you saw very shortly thereafter. That is taking place quietly, maybe a bit slowly, but I have seen the increase. We are utilizing technology in our fight against crime, and we'll continue to do so because I am very big on it.
Have you all made the link between the person that was held for attempting to harm a police officer and the inmate?
A prison officer. That's an ongoing investigation, and I'll leave it at that.
In respect to the crime situation, Jamaica is said that Jamaica's crime situation is worse than ours. Yet, one of the top tourist advisors has just issued that Jamaica is one of the top, within top 25 in the world of persons wanting to travel to. Will there be any special consideration being given to policing of tourist destination or tourist areas that tourists? Because we heard today that a foreign national, I think, was shot and killed in the Woodbrook area.
That was not tourist. It was not tourist.
Was not tourists?
I don't think so, no.
All right, but we heard that someone shot in the Woodbrook area. So is there any special consideration being given in respect to that situation as what happened?
The answer is that it doesn't have to be a consideration. We already have that in place. So, for example, when the cruise ships come in now, prior to a cruise ship coming in, what we do is we find out where it is, for example, tours are going to, how many persons are booked on tours, because of course they book in advance, and then we'll estimate if they're going to be extras, where the areas in Trinidad that they're going to visit, for example, Maracas, for example, the botanical gardens and these areas, and we make sure to deploy additional resources. So that is happening. Another thing I have spoken to the Commissioner of Police about is a special unit, for example, for the beaches, for example, for Maracas, and having police there on busier days, the weekends, the public holidays, a special unit for those types of things. So the answer is yes, as part of the whole deployment of police resources and other resources. When I was in Tobago yesterday, the Chief of Defence Staff was discussing with me that their officers who are based in Signal Hill, in Tobago, one of the things they do is in collaboration with the THA as well as the police service, they will deploy soldiers to certain places to give that sense of security, to give that, and those places invariably are exactly as you've just suggested. Where is it that the tourists are going to be? And just make sure, the presence of our soldiers, the presence of the police. So it is being done.
So I just wanted to ask you, just going to your legal mind, if I want to get your legal mind to this one, this is something which government has been after for a long time. Tomorrow we're going to see civil asset forfeiture legislation coming to Parliament. And does it surprise you at all that the opposition and persons associated to them are already putting out the narrative that it's draconian and
was that discussed at Wade Mark's press conference? Okay.
That's outside.
Oh, okay, by one of their operatives, by the usual person that they then try to distance themselves from. Absolutely not. Tomorrow it will be a very robust debate in Parliament, and we wait to see what happens when we get to Parliament. The government has brought this legislation. The Attorney General has spoken about it extensively, and we are ready for tomorrow. This is something that is going to benefit Trinidad and Tobago. This is something that's going to benefit our society. This particular piece of legislation goes directly into the heart of eradication of corruption and reduction of corruption. So anyone who says that they don't want to have to explain where their wealth has come from, immediately, in my humble opinion and my view, have something to hide.
Just getting back to the situation with the threats made against prison officers. I know you did say that you were successful in picking up one person who's at the time preparing to harm prison officers. As Minister of National Security, what's your advice to your prison officers today?
To my prison officers today, the prison officers will know that I've been working very, very closely with them from day one on a number of initiatives. Their safety and security, as is the safety and security of all persons in Trinidad and Tobago, is a priority for me. We are seeing the benefit of the interagency, multi-agency, not task force, but from day one I said, listen, this is something that is affecting everyone, so we need to bring all of the assets of our various agencies together to tackle it, and we are seeing the benefits of that. So my message to prison officers is we are standing by you, we're standing with you, we're standing in front of you, you have our full support, and that is not just talk, we're actually demonstrating it, we're walking the talk, and we're seeing the results of the work and the stuff we implemented, particularly to support those in the prison service.
I also saw that the Barbados government, they are going to have a 1-week gun amnesty. Is there any consideration for a similar effort?
No. The Commissioner of Police and myself were on a radio program last week, Friday, together at the same time. That question came up. A gun amnesty works in certain countries and certain circumstances. We don't think that is applicable to Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago, the guns are being used to carry out criminal enterprise. This is not, as in the old days, someone having a rusty old revolver with 2 rounds of ammunition. They're very sophisticated weapons that unfortunately are here in Trinidad and Tobago. And we don't think there's a benefit to a gun amnesty. We think persons will just bring in older guns, but those who are using the guns to commit crime in Trinidad and Tobago are not going to put down their guns.
So you keep with that, Minister, and keep on your answer last week. Shouldn't the greatest urgency be placed on legislation
Okay.
To ensure that this situation, because there almost every day persons, national citizens, are losing their lives by the use of firearms?
The answer is yes. The answer is absolutely. The answer is that is coming. In fact, the Commissioner of Police and myself are going to schedule a press conference together in the next few days. I've asked him because, yes, I have gotten the go-ahead to bring legislation that goes even beyond what I had suggested last week. So let's wait for that because I just want to crystallize the exact points. But absolutely, I am fully behind and went to the Prime Minister with the suggestions and he told me, go ahead, I've spoken to the Attorney General. So very shortly, in the next few days, you will hear about the type of legislation I intend to take to Parliament dealing specifically with that, because we're not going to sit down. This is a time to do things outside of the box. It's not business as usual. And there is not a single law-abiding citizen in Trinidad and Tobago who will not say things like bail and other things when it comes to repeat offenders with firearms. The law should not be different with respect to them. So we're not going to sit back and just allow them to wreak havoc on the country.
So this is like this. If you could give us a hint, I mean, this is
I'm not giving you a hint.
No, this is not just. This goes beyond the gun amnesty. This is something.
There is not gun. Okay, it's two separate points. I am not. There's no gun amnesty. All right. So what I'm talking about in response to a specific question from Mr. Burris is legislation that I intend to bring to Parliament to deal with firearms, repeat offenders who use firearms in the committing of criminal activities and crimes against persons.
Prison officers being able to take guns home, where are we with that?
Again, as you know, we went out for the procurement of these firearms, 250 handguns. I was asking that question this week. The firearms have not been finalized and purchased as yet. I understand that at the end of the procurement process and a contract is about to be awarded for the supply of these 250 firearms. And I told the permanent secretaries as soon as that is done, I want them to start the cycle again, as you've heard me say before. Same thing with the Stab Fest. We finished the first round of Stab Fest that you yourself tried on not too long ago, and I want them to go out now and procure more Stab Vests, and it's the same thing with the handguns.
Final question, Minister.
Thank you.
Final question. Misbehavior in public office. How come so far, 3 years and 7 months, no one, we have heard a lot of that during the campaign, no one allegedly involved in corruption or direct misbehavior? For instance, the situation with the change of the contract for the highway just before the elections, where you couldn't really go behind the persons from Brazil. Why have we not seen charges against those who have been involved in that aspect of things?
As you have heard me and others, including the Attorney General and Prime Minister, say on numerous occasions, a government doesn't bring criminal charges. So the government did certain work. I had led the charge on some of that work when I was at the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. That work, the culmination of some of that work are civil actions, because that's all we can do as a government. You can pursue, as you know, being a lawyer, I can pursue action on the civil arena. Involved in law, not a lawyer. You can pursue matters in the civil arena. That's what we're doing. The information, we are just, I'll put it like this. We are not in charge. As for the Commissioner of Police and the Director of Public Prosecutions to bring criminal action and criminal charges against persons. The Commissioner of Police has recently said that he's boosting resources, and he talked about it specifically. He said to deal boosting resources in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and on the legal side in particular to assist with some things like white-collar crime, as well as clearing the numerous backlogs he has at the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. What is going on? I don't get involved in that at all. That is a
length of time.
For action to be taken. Again, I am not the person. That's up to the Commissioner of, well, not the Commissioner of Police, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as well as the Director of Public Prosecutions. Okay? All right. Thank you all very much.
We've come to the end of today's weekly post-Cabinet Media Briefing. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube at TTT Live Online for all of the stories coming out of today's media briefing. I'm Mahalia Joseph Wharton. Have a good afternoon.